Homonormativity, the quiet force dividing the Wilton Manors LGBTQ community. Homonormativity, a rarely discussed term outside of academic circles, is a silent but pervasive force that shapes queer life, causing division within the LGBTQ community. In essence, it's the set of social norms that prioritize certain identities and behaviors, making some queer people more acceptable than others. It's the mindset that white, cisgender gay men often dominate queer representation on TV, while trans lives and issues affecting people of color are sidelined. It's the notion that some queer people mimic heterosexual norms, like getting married, adopting children, and living in suburban neighborhoods, while other forms of queer expression remain marginalized. At its core, homonormativity creates a hierarchy within the queer community, dictating that masculinity in men and femininity in women are ideals to be pursued. This has real consequences. It is an issue that is frequently discussed in an LGBTQ-dominated community like Wilton Manors. This phenomenon has been written about by Buffy Flores in Out magazine, saying, quote, "Homonormativity made same-sex marriage priority number one, when trans people still can't use bathrooms safely," end quote. The effects of homonormativity are not just limited to personal relationships and social dynamics. They seep into politics and public policy. Legislation targeting trans people, such as laws forcing them to use bathrooms corresponding to their assigned gender at birth, is a result of harmful norms. Unfortunately, we can still witness homonormativity and trans hatred in South Florida, and even in one of the gayest places on planet Earth, Wilton Manors. Credit goes to the spread of misinformation by right-wing communities and political parties. How can we miss the policies passed by the governor of the state, Ron DeSantis? We consider homonormativity in our own community. In a city that is so strong for LGBTQ people, are we overwhelmingly represented by cis white men? If that is true, where is a significant percentage of women, of people of color, of the trans community? You know, this is very, very interesting subject. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to inclusion and when it comes to talking to people outside of our community, we fall into this trap very often. I know when I look at public health needs assessments, we have a ton of information on LGBTQ community. It's all geared to white cis men. And so we don't have any information for 30 years on anyone else in the community except for white cis men. And so it becomes very dangerous when it comes to public policy, when it comes to resources being handed out. There's no data there to say, I need the money, give me the money, this is why, right? But it's even more damaging to the other individuals who want to live their full self and still don't feel included within their own community. It gets confusing. When you talk about people who are at risk of suicide, when you talk about people who feel like they're being marginalized out of pride. I've had people tell me, I don't see myself here. I don't feel like I can be myself here. And, you know, we have to be very, very aware when we're marketing for different events, when we're having conversations, that we're not going, everything is okay because it's okay for a certain part of our community. We have to always, always, always take into account the least of us, the people most at risk, and make sure that if we're taking care of them, then everybody else is automatically going to be fine. And that's the way that I see us dealing with this idea of homonormativity. This is from the 70s. If you remember, what's her name? The trans woman from Stonewall.
Marsha?
Not Marsha.
Oh, Sylvia Rivera?
Right, Sylvia Rivera.
Right.
She was yelling and screaming on the microphone going, I started this for you guys. I got you free, and now you tell me I can't even be here. Like, this is not a new concept. It's been something going on in our community for a long time. But now if we're going to put names to it and we're going to actually like talk about these issues, then we got to make sure we're addressing them. We're not just talking to them. Because people within the community get hurt. behind it.
How do you feel about the context of Wilton Manors, right? So this story talks about Wilton Manors in particular, right? So how do you feel about,
I don't know the community that well. Like, I don't live, you live here, right? Is it a mixed community?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because you're in Miami, which also has a sizable, Miami Beach, has a sizable community. Do you mind my asking, but from your perspective, are you seeing the same thing in Miami?
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, when you go to the organizations, it's cis white gay men that are in charge of all the organizations. The organizations that are not led, the organizations that and you're new here, but the organizations that are not led by them, they often struggle to get resources. They often struggle to get the funds. They're not on the boards of the R Fund. They're not on the boards of the
So why isn't more noise being made, though?
Well, I think this is helping. I think that the marginalized community has been saying it forever. It's just
so
who's
how do you
listening,
get them
right?
to pay attention?
That's why inclusion is really, really important, right? When you have other people sitting on those boards who are helping make the decision about where the money goes, about which organizations get the funding, about which organizations get the support that they need, all of a sudden we can make substantive change. But if everyone in those decision-making places is a cis white gay male, it's going to be hard to understand somebody else's experience outside of that. This is why inclusion is really, really so important. I don't expect them to understand it. Just put people at the table that understand so that we can start to address it.
Have a conversation.
Absolutely. But I think this is about the collective power, collective will, and also the role that leaders like myself have of like making sure that we help to mentor and bring others along, right? I fundamentally believe that that's how we make the changes, right? I'm at the table, so I'm going to bring along my brother and sister over there, right? I'm not going to just be the only one at the table. I'm like, ooh, I'm the token, thank God. So it's incumbent upon us who are at the table, who are in these conversations to say, wait a minute, I don't want to be the only one. Let's bring more people in to the table. And for me, like when I look at pride lines, right, I make sure in our hiring practices that we have a diverse community, right? That we're representative of the community here and that we're not just a community of men, right? Gay men, right?
Right, but we have to always remember that people in marginalized communities can't change racism. That is the responsibility of the white community.
Yes, for sure.
You cause racism, you have to fix racism. We can't fix that for you. That's on you to have those conversations to go, we got to change it, we got to do it differently. You and I can sit at the table and fight for what we can fight for, but we can't change that, right? Those discussions have to be had and they have to be addressed, right? Homonormativity, I think also because outside of our community, it's policymakers in Tallahassee are much more comfortable when a straight actor, I know myself, I come in, they don't even know that because of the way I present, that's not what they're very comfortable to invite me into the office as opposed to someone else who may make them feel uncomfortable just by their presence, right? So there's a lot that we have to wade through. But having this conversation, I'm really, really glad that we're having this conversation, especially for our community, because we have to lead it, right? We can't expect people from outside the community to understand it until we start addressing it.
But to your point, though, if we, Vaughn, you should go next. If we don't push and hold people accountable, they won't change. So I think it is up to us as well, right?
To say something,
But if we're at the table, we have probably just as much power, right? And so it's up to us to push the conversation as well. I know I've been around people and in circles where, guess what? That one person likes being a token. They like it. They don't want to bring nobody along.
They don't speak up?
And so, no, I've been at the table. I'm like, what? Like, bro, like, really? You're not going to bring the rest of us along with you? And they like that place of privilege. So it really is incumbent upon us to be there, to speak up, and to hold them accountable, Well,
I think, I moved here 6 years ago, and I joined the Broward County HIV Health Services Planning Council. And I was the chair for the Community Empowerment Committee. And interesting thing that I thought was interesting was we had our very first community event when I was chair, and we actually held it at Ariana Center because we were inquiring as to why we didn't have a lot of transgender individuals accessing care and what maybe we weren't doing in Ryan White. And we had that meeting, and I still love them to this day, but they read us for filth. And I'm glad they did because I was able to sit back and go, this is the part where I'm talking about you have to get people around the table. And now today we do. We have transgender women around the table at the Planning Council. And I think when you talk about Wilton Manors and we talk about our community, and you're right, we have to advocate to have, if you're going to be in a room talking about a certain race or whatever category you want to talk about. If they're not there representing, keep your mouth shut until
Everybody
they
has
are.
to be present.
Make sure they're there.
That's right.
And if you don't vote on somebody's behalf, if they're not even being represented at the table. And we see that. And we also see people who all they want to do is be on a board of directors to put it on their resume. They're not doing the work. They just want to put it on their resume. And it's not really doing anybody any good.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.